So welcome everyone to today's webinar, which is brought to you by the National Institute for Health and Care Research Bristol Biomedical Research Centre, or NIHR Bristol BRC for short. You might hear me mention that again. I'm Zoe Trinder-Widdis. I'm the Head of Communications at the Bristol BRC, and I'll be your chair for today. So we're here today to launch the co-developed theatre how-to guide. So the session will be recorded and we'll make the video and presentations available on the Bristol BRC YouTube website and in our email newsletter. Hopefully in chat very soon there'll be some links to the website and our email newsletter so you can sign up. Just a bit of background about the guide. It came from an evaluation of the play Hard Evidence, which was a community theatre piece devised with Actor Community Theatre in Bristol. Hard Evidence was about domestic abuse and the empowering experience of being involved in research for survivors. Hard Evidence, in turn, came from the Comfort Study, led by the Bristol BRC and the Centre for Academic Primary Care at the University of Bristol. So, of course, today, we are going to be, the play was focused on domestic abuse, and while people's domestic abuse experiences aren't explicitly talked about, we wanted to share some resources for anyone who needs support. So we're just going to pop some organisations that support people who are experiencing domestic violence and abuse into the chat now. So today you'll be hearing from a range of people involved in the how-to guide, Hard Evidence and Comfort Study. Hopefully we can get them to turn their cameras on as I introduce them so you can recognise who they are. So first we have Natalia Lewis, and she'll be talking about the development from study to play to guide. Hi, Natalia. She's a senior research fellow at the Centre for Academic Primary Care, and she led two studies, Comfort and the evaluation of the Hard Evidence play that informed the development of the how-to guide that we're launching today. She also contributed to the development of the play by bringing the researcher's perspective as well. So be looking forward to hearing from her. And then she'll be handing over to Kat Papastavru-Brooks, who'll introduce the guide. Kat is doing a PhD at the University of Bristol, looking at the impact of neighbourhood violence. She's also working on eating disorder research in the UK. And she's having some trouble with the NIHR background, so hopefully you can see her properly today and she's not going to disappear behind it. So most of Kat's research centres around trauma, co-production methodology and the use of creative approaches in health treatment and research. And then we'll have an informal discussion with Natalia, Kat, and the theatre maker and public contributors who have been involved throughout. So the theatre maker is Ingrid Jones, and she is, hello Ingrid, she's Actors Associate Director for the past 32 years, which is a long old time. She works with vulnerable, marginalised and diverse communities, devising, writing and then directing theatre performances. She's written over 200 community theatre plays, including Hard Evidence, which have been performed locally, nationally and internationally. And then we have the stars of the show, Shas and Alison, who are the public contributors on the Comfort Study, and they help devise and write Hard Evidence. They've performed the piece several times in Bristol, both at Actors Theatre Space and at community venues. So really looking forward to hearing from our speakers today. There'll be an audience Q&A with all the speakers after the presentations and discussions, so you can use the Q&A button at the bottom for this. So now I'm going to hand over to Natalia, who'll tell you about the development of this project.
Thank you, Zoe. So my objective for today is to draw like a roadmap illustrating how this how-to guide came about, and this will be the sit in the background for the following contributions. In 2018-2020, I led the Comfort Study. We developed a pilot-tested a trauma-specific mindfulness course for women survivors of domestic abuse with post-traumatic stress. Throughout the study, we worked with an advisory group of public contributors. We had 6 women survivors of domestic abuse who closely worked with us throughout every stage of the study, helping to plan, deliver, analyze and disseminate our findings. I think it was the most satisfying experience of public involvement in my research project throughout my 25-year research career. And I think it was partly because we had a very dedicated and experienced public engagement contributor, Noreen Hopewell-Kelly, who was instrumental to supporting the advisory group and building trust and relationships between researchers and public contributors. It's natural that after we finished the study, we really wanted to continue our partnership with public contributors, and with Noreen's support, we secured small grant to test if and how creative methods can be used to disseminate messages around public involvement in research project on sensitive topics. And two public contributors from the Comfort Advisory Group, Shas and Ali, came on to work with Actor Community Theatre with Ingrid to co-develop a play which they called Hard Evidence. The play tells a story of a woman who is a public contributor on a study about mindfulness, and it follows her journey through getting empowered by her participation in a research project and enabling her to help a friend who is also experiencing domestic violence. The play was performed several times in Bristol on different venues, and early feedback from the play team and from the audiences indicated that there was an impact. The play and the co-production process had an impact on all parties involved. That is why we decided to formally evaluate the play. And we secured another small grant for the hard evidence evaluation project, which Kath carried out so brilliantly. She published a paper from this evaluation, and then we wanted to share our learning from the hard evidence evaluation project and apply it to other examples of public involvement in research. We worked with a group of key stakeholders to develop recommendations on how to safely use creative methods to disseminate research on topics which can be sensitive, potentially re-traumatizing to people to engage with. And we summarize these key recommendations in the how-to guide, which we are launching today, a product of collaboration and co-production between researchers, theatre makers, public contributors, and people interested in co-production. I'm now going to pass on to Kath, who is going to share her side of the story.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Natalia. Yeah, so as part of one of the things that was really emphasized in the evaluation of hard evidence and kind of went through all our approach to evaluating it was that everyone on the team felt that, including the public contributors, felt it was really important to think about ways of managing the risks associated with this kind of work, and risks of re-traumatizing the actors and the play's team who are involved in it, and also any risk to audiences as well of being re-traumatized. And you'll hear a lot more about it from some of the people speaking later. But one of the big emphasis throughout this project was thinking creatively about ways of managing and mitigating some of those risks. So in our development of the how-to guide, we held a workshop and we invited lots of key stakeholders from very different backgrounds, which was really exciting, bringing everyone together in one room. And really the kind of purpose of the workshop was to present some of our findings and present some of the things that had sort of come up in the interviews, particularly we were doing as part of the hard evidence evaluation, and then just really work together to think about creative ways of overcoming some of those issues, and to just develop some suggestions for anyone who wants to use creative co-produced methods as a tool for disseminating research. I think one of the things that came across quite clearly early on in the process of developing the guide was that actually you can't give guidance on every issue. You can't give a kind of how-to set of instructions that you can tick off all the boxes and then you've done it well, you've done good creative co-development. It was just really important to us that actually what we're providing here is a list of things that you should consider, you should think about, you should discuss within your team. And really it's not a checklist of things to fulfill, but really just important discussions to have if you are thinking about using an approach like this. And yeah, during the research, and Natalia showed it on the previous slide, during the workshop, we had a brilliant live illustrator, Kimmy Aubrey, who live illustrated the event and also took lots of field notes from it. And then from those kind of field notes and from the live illustration and through a kind of iterative process back and forth with people that have been involved in it, that's how we developed the guide. And it includes, and you'll kind of see more because we'll talk through all the sections, but it includes some things that we would recommend thinking about before you start, just as part of the process of deciding whether something like this might be right for you. And then also things to think about throughout the process, including how to promote the safety of everyone, how to develop trust, collaboration, and peer support in the relationships that you have, both with your audiences, but also with the people who are involved in the project team, how to center choice and empowerment, both in the kind of stories you're telling, using creative methods, but also in how you're working with people, and yeah, making sure the finished product is really accessible as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kat and Natalia. So now we're going to talk about the actual guide itself, which is centered around 5 different chapters. So we're going to have a little discussion about each chapter. So the first chapter is before you start. So I thought that the best person maybe to think about that would be Kat. And the question I wanted to ask was, what should you consider before you get started on a project like this? So much, no doubt.
Yeah, a lot of things that we tried to cover are kind of a small amount of in this guide, but I think often when you come into a project like this, you know, a lot of the advice you get is actually after you've started working on it and after you decide that's what you're going to do. And I think actually it's an amazing approach to use and it's really impactful, and our evaluation really showed that. But actually, you know, it places a lot of demands on the kind of people who are involved in it. But yeah, for us, and I think one of the things that came across really strongly in the co-development work we were doing around the guide was actually thinking about your motivation to engage in this piece of work. You know, why is it important to do it in a co-developed way? Have you thought properly about the fact that in doing it in a co-developed way, that means you have to give up some control over the final message. You have to accept that if you are using it to disseminate research, you know, it might be disseminating other things as well. And thinking about different kinds of capacity and support you have to do it really as well. You know, what funding you have, and yeah, what support of other organizations you have. And obviously with this, it was amazing because it was done in collaboration with ACTA and Ingrid. And I think it's those kind of collaborations and those kind of supports that you really need to think about if you do want to embark on something that is a bit more creative as a form of dissemination.
I think that idea of letting go of control is really important, because I know with hard evidence there was sort of an idea that a lot of it would be about the empowering nature of being involved in research, which definitely was in there, but maybe didn't feel like the kind of key core of the piece. Ingrid, have you got anything to sort of reflect on? Especially, do people come to you with a kind of like, this is what we want, and you're like, no, it's not going to end up like that?
I think it's about for me, it was very much about what the participants wanted as well. So for me, it was the performers. You know, what do they feel is really important, because they're the ones that had been all through the PPI and were now here at the theatre. So for me, it was like making sure that they felt it was genuine to what they wanted and what they felt was important. You know, they'd gone through all the learning, they knew what was significant to them. As well as obviously speaking to Natalia and getting things from her perspective as well, and Noreen.
Yeah, bringing all those viewpoints together, definitely. Natalia, what about you? Because I guess you were actually there at the start of it as the researcher.
I think to me the the biggest revelation was this this let it go thing. Because as a researcher, I'm trained to write a protocol, to set up objectives and to meet these objectives at the end. And it didn't work like that at all. And I'm really grateful for this experience because I had an opportunity to learn it through doing things. Yeah, that is why it was good for my development as a researcher.
Absolutely.
I'm very grateful for this experience.
Yeah. Shaz and Alison, I realised that I guess you probably were there at the start, because in fact this sort of developed from them working with you at on the comfort study. So it wasn't like you were brought in later, you were there at the very beginning. So have you got any reflections on that? So I always sort of name you both like you're a kind of unit. Happy for whoever wants to speak first. Oh, Shaz, you're still on mute. Do you want to go first?
Hang on. Right.
You're unmuted. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. I think because I in the beginning I went in with a kind of, well, I suppose with a hidden agenda, and as we progressed through the processes of like being a PPI, and then from the PPI going in and then being asked if we would be part of a play, and then leading to this webinar, I think there's just, again, like Natalia said, it is about letting go. It's letting go of that, our inner expectations of what we want, and it opening up to becoming something and morphing into what it morphs into, without I don't know how to put it. It's kind of like without the agenda or expectations that that we have inside ourselves, or we think, or we might feel of how we think things should be. And again, it just comes back to that letting go. And I think for me, that's been the whole process. It's been that growth of being able to let go of my past, because I've gone on this journey, and I'm so grateful to you guys for giving me the opportunity.
That's amazing to hear. And I think there's a lot of being pushed out of comfort zones, I think, happening across the board for everybody. Alison, I don't know if that rings true with you.
Yeah, definitely pushed out of comfort zones. I mean, it was a journey of emotions. We went from meeting in our little group, and then like, oh, anyone wants to play? Well, I've done theatre. I've been lucky enough to get on the stage at Bristol Vic, and I really enjoy it. But there's a script that someone else writes, and you when you have to like bring your life experiences, because we didn't write about anybody in particular, but and share that with people in order to potentially say there's help for people out there. And it is a journey of a roller coaster of emotion. Some because we went on a Monday morning. Some Monday mornings I was like, do I have the strength for this? And sometimes it was really exhausting, but then it was really rewarding at the same time. And I don't think Shaz and I realized the effect it would have on people until we did our first show, and audience members, and these were people we don't know, because every time there's I let my theatre group know, and quite a few people came over that knew me, and people came over to us and they were crying, and we were like, wow, we've just done this, but it needs to be spoke about. And and we were looked after very well by everybody involved. We didn't feel like we had to do anything. We did it all at our own pace, which I think is very important. We kind of led the way, and if there was something that we didn't want to do, like when Ingrid said to me, you're going to do a movement piece, and I said, let me stop you there, I'm not dancing for anybody. But the movement pieces were actually in, and they were on a box, and they were done very delicately, and I think without those, because it kind of the person I play, she's on a box, and she's quite at the beginning she's quite hiding her face, and towards the end Shaz's character is encouraging her and teaching her about things, and helping her, and towards the end she's happy to stand up, and they both do the same movement, so it really worked. But
no dancing. Rule number one, no dancing. But it was like interpretive movement instead, wasn't it? And when I watched, they were some of the most powerful parts of the whole play, actually. And actually, what you've done very beautifully, without any planning here, is lead wonderfully into the second chapter, which is all about ensuring everyone is safe, because these are difficult things to talk about. They can be re-traumatizing for you. They can be re-traumatizing for the audience, or traumatizing for the audience. So, how do we make sure people feel safe, both the people behind it, but the audience as well? Who is going to start? Would Ingrid, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me as a theatre maker, trying to create a safe space is the key at the very beginning, and developing those relationships of trust and an atmosphere where you can feel free to share and talk is really important. And so the way we started is obviously making sure everyone was comfortable getting to ACTA and being there. We did actually start on Zoom very initially because we were still in lockdown. But when we could come to ACTA to start rehearsing, and just making the space comfortable and safe and welcoming, and you've got drinks, you've got biscuits, you've got simple things like that make a real difference.
Always helps.
What's your favourite biscuit? Let me get it in, making sure we've got the special tea that Shaz and Alison like, we had the Lady Grey every week. But it's things like that are actually really important, that people feel, valued, and you put in that time and effort. And then it's kind of really being clear of what you want shared and what you don't need to talk about, and that you only talk about things you want to talk about and feel ready to talk about and safe to talk about, and that we're not asking for anything that would put you out in an uncomfortable place. And we started by doing really simple exercises where you're just encouraged to talk about just everyday things. So we spent time just trying to find things we had in common, and that just got us talking. And it was at that moment that the three of us discovered we all went to the same secondary school.
Oh, no way.
I know, how mad is that? But it was things like that just got us sharing and talking. And I think Shaz and Alison will agree with me. One of the key things to all our rehearsal process was laughter, that we laughed lots. We had lots of fun, and we played some silly games. And when things did get a little bit intense, we would then find ourselves laughing about things. And Alison's adoring box that followed her around, that she sat on, that there was just little jokes that we had that we just lightened the load of what we were doing. And then I think very early on we talked about exactly what we were going to be doing with the stories and things that were shared, so that everybody felt very safe in the knowledge of how we would use what was shared. And we talked very clearly about what message we want to put across, what we wanted the audience to talk about, so that everything felt very open and shared and discussed, because at the end of the day, Shaz and Alison are the experts, not me, and they know the audience, they know, so much more than me. So it's kind of valuing that and using that knowledge so that everyone felt safe. And then again, very early on, I expressed the desire that I wanted the play to be about characters, not about themselves, so that there was a step back from it. It was you're removed from the emotional impact of it, because it's not you we're talking about, it's a character. It's a lady with a name, and this is who she is. It's not you. And obviously we're using all your life experience, all the things not just about yourself, but other people you've met in your life. You can bring that to this character, but you're separate from it, so that there's safety there as well. So
like an airlock kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that was pretty much what I
So Shaz and Alison, how was the experience for you in those moments?
But I think Ali just absolutely adored her box.
I love my box.
Box loved you by the sound of it.
I think the boxes gave us grounding. It grounded us, because we had, I think for Ali, because she was on the box longer than I was, I think it gave her that opportunity to feel grounded in the character and to be able to use the box as that step back as well. I think, I mean, I can't speak for you, Ali. I'm just saying what I observed, and I think for me the box helped, because it kind of gave me that the base that I needed to do the breathing exercises, and then in order then to move forward into the character, and then at the same time recognize that this is not about me, this is about the character, I think. And again, in terms of the empowerment, I mean, because of what the process that Ingrid took us through right in the beginning, I think because we'd done it on Zoom because we were in lockdown, we were a step away, so it was easy to kind of discuss what we wanted to talk about. And you done icebreakers as well, didn't you? Each time we kind of linked in, and then from those icebreakers we then began that process of conversation, and from the conversation that kind of empowered us to then go into that, oh my god, this is so scary, we got to go to actor. So how are we going to do this? But you know, and so that was, you know, actually meeting up in actor was that was quite, it was scary and at first, and but Ingrid, and not only Ingrid but also the lady that was doing the lighting and other people behind the scenes in the building would come and sort of, you know, and encourage us as well, and that was also, it almost felt like a family environment rather than, you know, just, you know, you're just there to do a job kind of thing. And I think that for us, I think that process, even with Natalia, we knew Natalia was in the background, we knew that she was being spoken to, and Noreen was also in the background, and she would come and visit, and because of that, it kind of felt that we were part of something bigger than ourselves as well. And I think because we were part of something bigger than ourselves, it helped us to move through and evolve. I mean, for me, I definitely evolved, you know, and I've definitely gone through that letting go of what the past and the growth. And I feel now, because we're so much, you know, that it's a big step away now from when it happened, in hindsight, I'm in a completely different place to where I was right at the beginning of the journey. And I'm really happy and content within myself, you know, because I've let go of all that baggage, because that's what the process has done for me.
It's a completely transformative experience from your perspective then in that case. And I wonder if there hadn't been the sort of research underpinning it, that kind of almost like the safety net of like, oh, this is for a research project, you know, it's sort of, whereas if it was just you talking, you know, your life experiences or whatever, then that's much more kind of, there's less safety there in a way, isn't there? And I'm sure it would have still been felt safe and everything.
I
but
mean, I think because I mean, even when you're in character, you're still putting yourself out there, and putting yourself out there for, you know, especially if you lack in confidence, self-esteem and self-worth. And you know, if you're in that position, you're in an environment where that's taken away from you, and you all of a sudden you're in an environment where you're being empowered to face that and to grow through, you know, to grow into self-worth, self-confidence, and, you know, self-esteem. I mean, it's priceless. It's absolutely priceless, you know. And you know, I've been doing PPI for many years, and each time I do a different project, I've always found that I've grown, and there's a huge value to research. And I think that people don't really respect how much people like your good selves put into research for people like me to grow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not a kind of exploitative, extractive relationship. It's much more everybody's kind of gaining and benefiting and growing as a result, definitely. And I think this sort of touches quite nicely on, again, segues beautifully into the sort of the next chapter, which I think we've talked around this subject already, the kind of trust, collaboration, peer support kind of elements. I think, again, this probably is one for Ingrid, but I'd be interested to hear, you know, Natalia and Kat as well, especially as you are sort of slightly more removed from the process. But how do you build those strong, supportive relationships that kind of safeguard emotional safety and well-being, and other than tea and biscuits?
I think a lot of it is just about respect. It's respecting each other, respecting that that everybody in the room has got their own different opinions on things, different experiences, and they've got so much to bring. And I think in the position that I'm in, it's, you know, I value everything that they're giving me, because that's what we're going to develop the script from. And in the same way, I'm sure with PPI, you're valuing everything they're bringing because it's their experiences that goes into the research. So it's, I think, you know, you're starting from a place where you're already valuing everything that people are bringing, which really helps. And I think it's to those clear boundaries, being really clear about what you can talk about, what you don't feel safe to talk about, so that everybody's just aware of what it is, and also having time to just go, actually, it's okay for us to stop talking now. It's okay for you to go, I just need to leave and just have some space, actually. I just need to actually stop this or whatever, and just feeling safe to be able to do that, and that's okay. Yeah.
I definitely feel like I sort of came late to this project really once the play was kind of developed, but I could kind of see the trust and like the joy that you guys had in the kind of relationships you'd all developed. And it was such an amazing, like brilliant and beautiful thing. I don't know how common that is in kind of research and PPI, but it was a really great thing to behold. So I'd be quite interested to hear what Natalia, sort of at the kind of other side of things, was sort of, you know, how did you stay connected to this while all this brilliant work was going on at ACTA?
We stayed connected with Ingrid. We met several times to talk through the script, and I communicated the messages I kind of thought were very important to portray women not as victims, but as a very, very strong personalities, with the hope yeah, I just respected their expertise, because I saw them as experts in their fields, and yeah, this was the underpinning principle and approach from my end.
Which are essential to kind of effective co-production, isn't it? This idea of valuing everybody's knowledge, not just the kind of academic knowledge, but the knowledge that everybody brings to it. And you're saying about sort of strong women, I think you had good raw material to work with Shas and Alison, who are obviously very strong, powerful women in their own right. So, well, you know, it's just all kind of came together beautifully, didn't it? I think that we've kind of, again, all of these kind of chapters, they kind of interlink and all touch on each other. But the chapter 4 is about choice and empowerment. So I think this one's for Shas, if that's okay. I want to know how can we make sure the play or whatever we're producing is empowering for people with lived experience, both in terms of the project, but also the play itself. I mean, you have spoken about how you did feel really empowered. So what do you think the kind of magic ingredients were to make that happen?
I think the magic ingredient, I think, is listening. It is active listening. I think, and Ingrid was very good at that, and so was Natalia as well when we were doing the actual PPI project. And I think through the active listening, that empowered me and the other people that were involved to be able to share their lived experiences, and I think, because I think, Hallie, you were pregnant at the time, weren't you? And I think that also encouraged you to, the process that you were going through. I felt that you were able to come to there and talk about stuff that you wouldn't normally have, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to have talked about, I think, and share with other women as well, in order to be able to take us through the process of moving from the PPI project into the acting side of things as well. And I think, and I think we did form quite a good bond, and we did. There's a level of trust there as well between us because of that whole process, and because we were able to be given the opportunity or for freedom of expression. And I think freedom of expression was really, really important, because we weren't we didn't feel that we were being held back by what we thought or what we were feeling, or how we kind of managed our own well-being, and that other people were there helping us to manage our well-being as well as ourselves.
Yeah, looking after each other, definitely. Ali, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think we were very fortunate to have such a good group. Unfortunately, one of our group, Jackie, who introduced me to the group, passed away just before we did hard evidence, or just after, and she actually got cancer. So I just want to mention, it wasn't just us two. There was a whole group of ladies that, for whatever reason, couldn't, and I think it was probably because of lockdown and because of COVID, they took a step back and they concentrated on their families. So it's not just, everyone says, oh, Shaz and Ali, but we experienced it with a group. There was a much bigger group of us, and people have lost, and people have gone on and done other things. But we also had Annie, who worked with us. She's a young carer from ACTA, and we still speak to Annie now. We've kind of took Annie under our wing. She's such a lovely girl. It must have been very difficult for somebody, because she's a lot younger than us, and she obviously hasn't experienced abuse, but she's a young carer, which is why she was going to ACTA. So it was, she probably walked in there thinking, what on earth am I going to deal with? And even Annie was looked after well by everybody. She was made to feel as if she was part of us, and we'd all be doing things. We'd be like, oh, is Annie coming? And they'd be like, no, she's not involved in this. But we're like, well, we miss her. So yeah.
Where's Annie?
Yeah, where's Annie? Where is Annie today? But yeah, so yeah, I just think it's like, we were very fortunate. We had brilliant people like Natalia and Ingrid and Noreen and other people on the study with us that, they just empowered us, and and they looked after us very well. I mean, I actually got pregnant twice during the study. I lost a baby, and everyone was brilliant then, because I took a few weeks off and I said, I can't. And then was lucky enough to get pregnant straight after. And little Xander came to one of our meetings as well, as when he was a newborn baby. So yeah, they accommodated everybody, and he was kind of our mascot for a while. So yeah.
I think that shows actually the sort of time periods that a project like this, actually the time you have to commit to it. It's not something that just happens really quickly. This is, I mean, how many years has this been going on? I suppose Natalia will kind of know roughly when it all started, but it's not a brief thing.
2018. Yeah, this was the beginning of the conference study.
And we're still here 7 years later, still getting mileage out of it one way or another. And I expect your child is in school, and
yeah.
How time marches on. So the final chapter was about accessibility. So it's about, I suppose, maybe it's a slightly more practical question as well, but I think this one might again be for another one for Ingrid. It's about how you can make sure your play or whatever you produce is accessible to people from different backgrounds or with different access needs. You're the expert here, Ingrid.
So ACTA always only ever use spaces which are accessible, so will be physically accessible to everybody. And then I think when all our tickets for every show are absolutely minimal cost, so that finances shouldn't be a barrier for anybody coming. And then on booking, we always ask if anybody's got any extra access needs. So sometimes for some of our shows, if necessary, we've had signers or programs in large print, or so we try as best we can. Then I think again it's making sure that everybody that might want to come and see it can, is, do we offer parking, do we, it's just kind of looking at who wants to come and how can we make that happen. And again, I think the subject material, it's making sure that it gets out to the most appropriate audience. And again, Shaz and Alison are our experts on groups and organisations that we could advertise it at, and word of mouth, as well as social media, as well as flyers. And it's like, what format works for different communities, and then going to the actual spaces in communities, rather than assuming people will feel comfortable to come to ACTA, to come to a theatre. It's sort of going to venues which are within communities, buildings that are used already, that people feel more comfortable and safe to enter, so that they're more likely to come to. So yeah, I suppose it's targeting the audiences that you want, to make sure that they can come, and doing everything you can to support them to be there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I think now we've got a chance for the audience to ask questions, for you guys out there to ask some questions. We've already got a few in the question box, so I'll move to those. Because I was going to ask you about what you actually gained from the experience, but I think you've all answered that really well already. So Liliana has asked, how did you balance research and dramatization without compromising either the research or the artist's vision? So how did you balance all those elements? I'm not sure who wants to come in first on that.
Shall I start and then maybe hand over to the others? I feel that was probably, for me personally, that was probably the biggest challenge, because it's quite difficult to do, and as a sort of theatre maker, I'm all out on wanting to get a great story and for it to look visually exciting, and for the audience to sort of get something amazing from it, and all those sort of things. And it's like I felt like there was a lot to sort of pull it in different ways and to make sure I included, and also just sort of being clear that I completely understood what was the PPI message, and that we got that across, like, so I had Shaz and Alison there that had experienced it, so that really helped. But I think trying to get that balance wasn't easy, and therefore what was vital was the relationship I had with Noreen and Natalia, so that I could go, this is a very vague scenario idea, what do you think? This is the first draft of the script, what do you think? Can you make changes? Can you add bits? To try and make sure that the research side of it and the researcher's perspective was A, correct, and B, embedded within it. So it wasn't easy, I think, and that for me personally was the biggest challenge. But hopefully we hit a balance so that theatrically it still really worked as a piece. It was really interesting and exciting for an audience. It had a clear story, it had a clear message, but we sort of ticked everybody boxes, yeah. So yes,
Yeah.
Liliana, it was hard.
It's a good question as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? Natalia, did you want to say anything about kind of?
I don't know, Liliana, this was my first experience of collaborating on a piece which was based on a research project which I led. So I see it as, when you develop an intervention which is based on evidence from research, I saw it as a creative piece informed by research. So, and I think it worked perfectly. If you just accept that it will develop its own way and you cannot control it, then I think it worked.
Yeah, it's like Elsa sings in Frozen, you've got to let it go, haven't you?
Can I just jump in something at the
Of
end
course
as
you can,
well?
Kat.
Sorry. Yeah, I think what was really interesting as well, because obviously I interviewed all of the project teams, so got to get everyone's perspectives on how it had worked in that way. And I think from my perspective as an outsider interviewing people, everyone had really, really clear shared values with it, I think, and was really, really committed to the same things. And I know it's stuff that people have sort of talked about so far during this webinar as well, of, wanting it to be empowering, wanting it to like show kind of the resilience and the empowerment of the women, and wanting it to be an experience that was like, was good for everyone and wasn't going to harm anyone. And I think those kind of shared values underneath was like pretty much everyone who was involved in the project who I spoke to came out with like very, very similar answers to what they thought was important with it. And I think then once you have that underlying kind of values-based approach, actually the kind of smaller details of what gets included or doesn't get included are less significant, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. Does anyone else want to add anything? Or we can move on to the next question. So we've got a question about language, actually, about and I guess we've been using terms like empowerment and centering and grounded and hopefulness, which are very sort of well, they use the term psychobabble, but let's not go that far. But from the sort of world of psychology. But so what do we mean when we sort of say about being empowered? Because I think it's a word that's come up a lot. And I think Shas, you've used it a lot. What's your definition of that, I suppose?
Do you want me to take it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned it first. Sorry, I feel like I'm picking on
okay.
you, but
Empowerment. I think in terms of empowerment, I think it is about being given the opportunity to be free, to be able to express yourself and feel safe in the presence of somebody else, and being able to make yourself vulnerable as well. And I think I can't speak for Ali, but I know that there were moments and sessions where I felt extremely vulnerable, and then it was like, what do I do with that vulnerability, and how is that vulnerability going to manifest in in my future, where my past is a part of my present, even though my past is not actually a part of the play. If that makes sense, because this is a different character, this isn't me. And I think it was finding the balance of like, where do I find myself in what's happening within this process. And I think that's where the empowerment came into it, if that makes sense, because I was given that freedom to be able to express myself on a journey that I had no control over, in essence, because I never knew what my thoughts and my feelings or how my body was going to respond to what was going to happen within the process.
Yeah.
And I made myself vulnerable to that.
Yeah. So it's about feeling safe, but also taking those risks, and like, because you felt safe and supported.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you very much. We have a surprise guest who's just joined us. We have Noreen, whose name's come up a few times. Hello, Noreen. I don't know if people can see you. We're just doing the discussion, so it would be great if you have the Q&A bit. So if you do have any answers, you can pop in. But yeah, Noreen was the PPI. What was your job title? You're part of the BRC, weren't you?
Yeah, I was the research fellow, PPI lead for the BRC. So
Yeah.
worked originally with Natalia.
Made a lot of this stuff actually happen, so it's great you've been able to join us right at the end of this. So we've got a question from Sean, which has got a good few upvotes. So let's deal with this one. So we've already touched on how long this took, and it's clearly a labour of love, she says. It was indeed. So how did you navigate funding constraints, which often want you to kind of like produce an output or an end on a certain date? I suppose this might be one for the kind of research side rather than
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one, and I hope Noreen will step in and add your perspective on this. So the funding for all three pieces, the comfort study itself, the development of the play, and the evaluation of the play, they came from the same pot. It is NIHR Bristol Biomedical Research Center. And Noreen was instrumental in securing this small grant for play development, and we together applied for the hard evidence play evaluation project. And this is how Kat came, because she was our named researcher on the bid. So, I mean, I am a researcher in academia. This unpredictable landscape, this is true for any kind of long-term project, but I think this one happened because we were able to secure funding repeatedly.
It's the joy of NIHR infrastructure funding, where you've got kind of people like Noreen available to do interesting things like this, isn't it, Noreen?
We were really lucky. Natalia put together some great applications, but the BRC were really supportive, and they knew what we wanted to do, but they didn't actually put that many constraints on us. And we had a huge amount of freedom to explore this. We'd not done anything like it before, and didn't really know what was going to happen. So yeah, we were very lucky to have such supportive funders, and I think they saw the value in it once we did the first stage, and for them to fund then the subsequent stages was fabulous. We were really lucky.
Yeah, it's good that they had that sort of faith in you and could see that it was going to benefit in the end. And I think there's quite a good question that maybe sort of segues from that quite nicely, which is another Liliana one. So thank you, Liliana. She's asking about who the kind of target audience for the piece was and what the impact was. I don't know who wants to take that, or at least get started on that.
Shall I start?
Yeah. Good job, you joined at just the right time.
Sorry, I think to begin with, the target audience was, we were very keen to ensure that it wasn't just academics. And although we really wanted to share this as an innovative way of disseminating research and the kind of the world of PPI to academics, we also really wanted to kind of go back to the community with it and be able to disseminate to people who wouldn't come to the theatre. And I think for me, it was really important that Ali and Shaz had the opportunity to contribute to who the audience was going to be, and the community that they were, that they wanted to reach. So it was a real combination, and that in itself was quite difficult to reach the people we wanted to. But yeah,
those magic ingredients again, isn't it? Anyone else got?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was going to jump in.
No problem.
I think what was really interesting as well is, I think when we think about just like impact and reach and stuff, we often just think about breadth of reach and like how many people can you reach. And I think actually what came out really strongly in the evaluation and in the how-to guide is sometimes just reaching some people that you really want to impact, really want to kind of disseminate the message to is much more important than like how many people you can kind of get to. And I think with this, there was one performance of it that was a lot smaller, and actually interviewed some people from that performance, and that was the one I think where the audience members were really affected by it in like a really moving and kind of positive way. And that was because it was an audience that had a lot of survivors of domestic abuse in, and the play was really speaking out to them and speaking messages which are really important. So again, I think it is something to think really carefully about, particularly with a creative approach like a play. Is actually what it can often do amazingly is provide something really intimate, really impactful, and really close for maybe a smaller group of people. It's not going to reach thousands of people, but the people it does reach are going to be more affected by it potentially.
And I think that was true. One of the community performances, which maybe had about 6 people, but they all had lived experience and just found it was such a different experience sort of doing it on such a small scale. And the Q&A it wasn't a Q&A, it was just a chat. It was a really, really kind of beautiful thing to be part of. And I think we've got, Shaz, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just in terms of the smaller community, when we had the smaller people, it was much easier I found it much easier to perform. And not only did I find it easier to perform, I was actually able to engage the audience as well in one part, where I didn't feel comfortable enough to be able to do that with the larger audience and stuff. So I sort of just made up my lines as I went along, really. And said, "Oh, do you really want to hear this?" kind of thing. And it did work really, really well. I think, and because then we were able to engage the audience, not just as in them participating by being the audience, but by them participating by being a part of the play itself. And that made, I think, for me, I think that was probably my ultimate experience of the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quality over quantity, really, isn't it? So the depth rather than the breadth of those interactions. We might have time just for one. There is a question from Ben about is there a public available evaluation report? And it did get published as a paper, didn't it? Which I'm not sure we've added to the chat, which is a bit of an oversight. But perhaps if Kat can dig it out and pop it in chat, that would be amazing.
It's the evaluation of hard evidence, so it doesn't have the how-to guide in, but the how-to guide is also publicly available as well. But you're very welcome to put
that into chat as well. So I think actually probably it's best if we wrap up there, but I'm very sorry not to have got around to answering all those questions. There's some really great questions in there, but it's just too much to say, too much time. But thank you very much for that. So we're going to be popping a download link to the guide in the chat. I can see that's gone in now, so that's great. We'll also be sending that around to attendees and the people who signed up who didn't make it along with the recording and the slides. And we'll be doing a news story and blog about this project on our website, so keep an eye out for those. Again, if you want to keep in touch with us, our website and email newsletter have just been popped into the chat, hopefully. I think that might be the paper as well, the online library Wiley one as well, so that's great. Just to flag, there's actually a couple of events being run by the BRC's sister organisations, the Applied Research Collaborations, also funded by the ARCs, funded by the NIHR, which are called, or the ARCs they're also known as. They're doing two webinars, one on the 11th of June about exploring lived experience with creative arts, and another one on the 9th of July about creative arts for dementia, so they might be of interest to you guys as well. I think hopefully the links for those are going into the chat. Alison is setting up the Lotus group, which is for domestic abuse survivors, and that's in response to her own experience of seeing these worrying gaps in support when going through the system herself. So the group is about bridging the gap between people fleeing abuse and getting more formal support in place. So it's a safe place for vulnerable women to be supported and signposted while they're waiting, so they won't be alone like unfortunately Alison was for a period. So it's for women who are based in Bristol. It's at St Stephen's Church in Southmead. You're going to be starting in September, is that right? Yeah, and everyone's being trained at the moment, and everyone who's involved are all survivors of domestic abuse as well. And we've just hopefully popped the email into the chat. So if that's relevant to you, please do take that email or keep in touch, and we can connect you. But anyway, I just wanted to thank everybody. Thanks to everyone who came along, but also thanks very much to our panelists, to Natalia, Kat, Ingrid, Shas, and Alison, and our surprise guest, Noreen, as well. And John behind the scenes, who's been keeping the whole thing afloat and putting stuff in chat. But thank you very much to everyone. We really hope that you found it useful, and want to thank you for making the time to come along today. So thank you very much.